The Kansas Jayhawks fall to the Creighton Blue Jays. This is a statement maker for Greg McDermott's team. Final score, Creighton 76, Kansas 63. Your immediate take on Creighton's win over Kansas is what?
This is the Creighton team that we've been expecting to see for the last 4 weeks of the season, right? This is the Creighton team that we sat here on the show on the Big East preview and talked about as a potential Final Four team. That was the Ryan Kalkbrenner that we have been waiting to see since the season began, right? Pop Isaacs was unbelievable tonight. When you're going to get 44 points and 10 assists out of Pop Isaacs and Stephen Ashworth, that's going to be a difficult team to beat because you know you're going to get your 17-10, 18-10. You're going to get your defense out of Ryan Kalkbrenner. I thought it was a really impressive performance, and one that, you know, I do feel a little bit for Kansas in the sense that they are coming off of the win over Duke in Las Vegas, right? They are walking into an Omaha, an arena in Omaha that holds 19,000 people, where Creighton desperately needs a win after what happened to them at the Players Era Festival, right? After losing at home to Nebraska, after some of the early season struggles they've had. And they walked into a buzzsaw. You know, this is about as healthy as Creighton's been in a while. All season, they've been dealing with some injuries. Pop Isaacs missed the game. Stephen Ashworth missed the game. Ryan Kalkbrenner missed the game. Now you got them all back. Now you got them all healthy. They're playing at home. Number one team in the country is coming into your building, and 19,000 people are going nuts. You know, this is why college basketball is great, because the number one team in the country can go into that building and get their ass kicked.
John Henson, I want to give you these two notes on this game. One, DeJuan Harris takes 21 shots. 6 for 21. It was part of the game plan. Greg McDermott said, I'll just let him shoot all night. He did. It was wide, you know what, open. The other one is this. Hunter Dickinson takes just 4 shots in this game. 4. And accounts for 6 points on the road against Kalkbrenner, who's a 3-time Big East Defensive Player of the Year. But it just felt like Kalkbrenner owned Dickinson in this matchup of 2 of the best bigs in college basketball, John. Oh, we're not hearing John, it sounds like.
John is muted.
My bad. But that's been one of
start your point again, John. What would you make of Kalkbrenner over Dickinson? Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say that's been Hunter Dickinson's kryptonite over the last few years, size and length. And Kalkbrenner brings that to the table and more. You know, I kind of treat Hunter Dickinson how I used to play Steven Adams. If you could get him out of the game early, he's a lot easier to handle. And I think that's what Creighton did. Hunter Dickinson looked uninterested, kind of looked like he just was over it. He wasn't getting the touches he usually gets. And, you know, even more impressive, I mean, this was a wire-to-wire win against, quote-unquote, the best team in the country. So a healthy Creighton, looks like this could be their ceiling, man. They could be one of the top teams in the country. They've got some ground to make up with a couple bad losses. However, they have the time, and they're going to be good coming down the stretch.
Yeah, and I think more than anything, John, is we know where Kansas is going to be at the end of the season, right? Like, look, you go on the road, you lose a game like this, it happens. It's not the end of the world. It wasn't the greatest matchup. The way that Creighton plays, just kind of putting Kalkbrenner in front of the rim, it's a really easy way to negate what Kansas does best, which is like getting the seals and getting the pins and trying to create ways to get angles for Hunter Dickinson to score, right? Like that's kind of what their offense is built on. So like this stuff kind of happens. What matters here is that Creighton has taken some losses. The Big East overall has taken some losses, and now they're going to have a 13-point win over a team that we know is going to be in and around the top 5 or the top 10 of every single metric that is known to man in college basketball, and that's going to be there for the rest of the season. Like that's something that when you look at their resume in March on Selection Sunday, you can say, well, yeah, look, they did all this, but they got that win over Kansas. That kind of proves what they are, right? And then that's going to have the trickle-down effect to the rest of that conference. And the Big East needed that, man. Like the Big East badly needed some of that. They needed Providence to beat BYU last. They needed that Villanova win over Cincinnati. And that stuff is going to have an impact when it comes to Selection Sunday.
Absolutely. Reports of the Big East demise greatly exaggerated because what the league has done, this does go to show you, you can change your season in one night this time of year. You can't necessarily do it in January or February, but on one night during November or December, the first 3 weeks of December, your whole season can change. Let's face it, Creighton had taken losses at home to Nebraska, who we're still unsure of big picture, to San Diego State, who looks to be good, but San Diego State ran them off the floor. Now, they were banged up, but still. And then you lose to Texas A&M. Creighton, it's hard to say that a game against the number one team in the country is a must-win, but for a team that now faces UNLV at home, let's face it, a game that you're supposed to win, and then at Alabama, you really don't want to you don't want to be forced in a corner where you have to win a game in Tuscaloosa for your non-conference to have any sort of a gem in it. So for Creighton, this is a massive win for them. It also does show, John, Greg McDermott, the last 2 times he's had number one teams in his building, has beaten them. UConn last February was the last game that Connecticut lost. And then tonight, McDermott lost 6 games in a row 2 years ago. I never worry about him in terms of being able to make sure he gets to the NCAA tournament. And tonight you saw what Creighton is. But I think the other side of this is to flip it, John. Like Kansas, they don't feel like the number one team in the country. And the reason why is perimeter shooting. They got all these different transfers. They were supposed to be a really good perimeter shooting team, potentially. And John, it hasn't translated for this team. How concerned are you about Kansas's perimeter?
I'm very concerned because, they have good shooters, but not great shooters. And you just never know how that's going to translate out of the portal. I mean, we're going to talk about North Carolina later, but Cade Tyson was the number 2 shooter in the country last year. And he just looks like a whole completely different player. So you never know how it's going to translate. I do worry about Kansas. It looks like a NBA team. They got a nice free agency, a lot of highly paid players. And, they're number one because of who they are and what they are. But from an eye test, they didn't play like a number one team as maybe Auburn did tonight against Duke, where you just felt like, okay, if this game was on a neutral court, I think Auburn would have a chance. I don't think Kansas would have beat Creighton tonight on a neutral court at home anywhere. So they've got to figure it out. And the thing I see a lot of times with these like kind of put together groups, these highly paid put together is the continuity and the togetherness and the things of that nature. It just kind of lacks a little bit of that on the court. And then when stuff gets tough and you get punched in the mouth, you see separation from these teams. And that's what happened with Kansas tonight.
Yeah, real quick on that too, John. I think that you kind of saw my concern with Kansas is I feel like they're a little bit schemable because of the shooting at the point guard spot and the shooting with KJ Adams and maybe a little bit of the issues that you have with spacing as a result of that. And I think that you kind of saw that with the fact that Creighton, who had played a single possession of zone this entire season, who the last 2 years had played a grand total of 47 possessions of zone, more than 99% of their defensive possessions over the course of the last 2+ seasons have been man-to-man. They started this game out in zone. They played the first 8 minutes in zone and completely took Kansas out of their rhythm. And to me, that is a sign that, one, they don't really respect a lot of the shooters, and they will live and die with those guys taking jump shots instead of being able to get Hunter Dickinson a post touch or be able to get, KJ Adams in those short roll actions off the ball screens where he's just such a killer. They kind of said, look, Zeke Mayo, AJ Storr, DeJuan Harris, David Coit, you guys want to beat us? Those guys took a combined 56 shots tonight. Those 4 guys. That was Greg McDermott saying, go ahead. If your guards are going to beat us, we'll live with that. We got Pop Isaacs and Steven Ashworth. And it's worrisome for me a little bit when it comes. Kansas is awesome. They're a top 5 team in America. I don't think there's any way you can argue that. I do think that this is a flaw that is something that's a little bit exploitable, if that makes sense.